Do you feel like a creative strategist needs media buying experience to be successful in a performance role?
The most important thing you said there is in a performance role,
Okay.
right? Because most of these roles are either not performance roles or are performance roles,
Hmm.
whereby you're being expected to make content that performs well, but you're not really incentivized to, or maybe even the agency isn't incentivized to. So to me, it comes down to like incentives for people and for businesses. So that comes down to like how you bill your clients and what that contract is. So now we've taken a far leap from what we were talking about, but um, I do think that like a I'm biased. I think I'm quite good at creative. In fact, I'll confidently say I'm very good at creative. But I'm also a media buyer by trade. Like that's my background. So I am biased to say that. I think it's absolutely possible to come in with. I think that there's a world in which if you are an expert in understanding creative from a psychological standpoint and understanding how to get attention and keep attention and make people feel, then I think learning some of the media buying aspects is probably gonna help and probably not be that hard. If you don't know marketing or media buying and you don't know how to really make a good piece of content, then that's where I think you're going to struggle. Is you're in the middle, you're trying to figure out both, and you don't have expertise in either. And that's where I see honestly most creative strategist types is kind of like not really comprehending the expertise of either side. No
Mm.
offense to those creative strategists.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's a new role. Creative
Yeah.
strategy. It's a newer role where is it a copywriter? Is it a seasoned media buyer?
Right.
Do you need graphic design experience to understand how to translate ideas
Right.
into creative? It's a very new role for a lot of people.
So let me just add though, again, reiterating, like a creative strategist isn't that new of a role, but performance creative
Mm.
strategy is, right?
Mm.
Where like it used to not matter as much. You used to kind of be able to like just make a bunch of stuff and like some stuff would hit and some stuff doesn't. Now the bar is higher than ever. The bar for getting attention is higher than ever. The bar for keeping attention is higher than ever. And the bar for getting people to take action is higher than ever. So you really, in order to get that performance side of things, you really need to step up your game in terms of understanding systems and media buying, and also understanding creative and your consumer from a deep, empathetic, psychological standpoint.
And maybe if you could elaborate on it a bit, you said something earlier about incentivized to perform with performance.
Yeah.
And I saw a tweet from you
Yeah.
recently that started out talking about you've had ads that work for 2 weeks, you've had ads that work
Sure.
for years, and
Yeah.
it can really depend on how the agency is set up to see
Right.
what type of creative they put out.
Yeah. Yeah. If I have an agency and I'm incentivized and I say to the client, like, hey, here's what you need is 30 pieces of content a month, right? And you need that because the content, goes bad and it fatigues, or it's hyper trendy, right? If you pitch that and you sell that and you're creating the system by which everyone believes that you just need lots of ads, and then my agency makes money by just perpetuating that, right? Like
Mm.
that's how that works. That's not how actually my agency that I own a part of, AdCrate, works. We work on a performance model. So we're heavily incentivized to make content that works and scales and spends a lot for a long time. And I actually am working on something I've kind of done, like, I don't want to say like a behind closed doors beta or whatever, but I'll announce it here in case anyone listening is interested. I myself basically offer what I call one banger ad, which is where I will, for free, make your brand an ad. If it's a brand that makes sense for me to
Mhm.
try and something I will enjoy, I'll make it for free. But then you're going to pay me a percent of spend on that ad in perpetuity.
Mm.
And my goal is to make you the best performing ad in your account that not only takes over most of the spend in the account, but helps to scale and spend more in the account. And I did that with one brand and nailed it. I mean, it took me like 8 versions, but I still got it within, basically one shoot. With so like that's something I'm considering starting to roll out a little bit
Yeah.
more, because I don't want to be like running a large agency. Just not interesting to me right now. I mean, I love ad create and I love doing that, but I also like know that I can make a high value ad for a brand, and I know brands need it. And what I don't want to get caught doing is be responsible for 30 turds of creative,
Pumping stuff out. Yeah.
pumping stuff out, because that's not the right incentive. The right incentive is one killer ad. It doesn't have to be one, right? But like, if I'm incentivized to make one great ad and it fails, I don't get paid, right?
Mhm.
And then that's fine. If I make one killer ad and it scales and succeeds, I get paid. Your business owner, you make a ton of money, right? Like that's mutually incentivized structure there. And I think the creative nature, the creative industry, the creative agency industry has for the longest time been built on quantity, right? Like it pains me when I see ads that are made with intentional short shelf lives. I hate that. Like when I see a small local brand, like a local like store, do a seasonal campaign for like a week long event, or a 1-day event, but they only advertise for a week.
So like
And I'm like,
Black Friday, Cyber Monday, or Mother's Day, or like a
no, yeah, Mother's Day is maybe a good example. I get that, but like I would think of like even dumber, smaller holidays,
gotcha.
right? Like
Yeah.
Flag Day.
National
whatever
Pet
it is,
Day.
like
Yeah.
yeah, some will do that, or whatever it is. And I'm like, you put all this money and energy into into concepting, shooting, editing, paying an agency to deal with all this, when you could have made something that's reusable
Hmm.
and evergreen. At least I like the brands that do that year over year. They reuse it. Like I love that. I think it's Cadbury eggs. Like you can see the same bunny ad that I think I saw as a child. They still run that on TV. That is great. That is not an example of a creative agency where they like made one-time use things. They made something that's lasted for a long time. And I think about that and I look at that and I'm like, the utility of that ad, right? They keep getting value out of that one shoot, out of that one edit. So like that's what I try to remind myself is like it is possible to make stuff that has longer shelf life if you believe it and if you try. It doesn't mean you'll succeed. It doesn't mean I will have 100% success rate. I don't. I fail all the time, and that's part of the game. But at least I know I'm incentivized to make something that can function, can work at scale over time. And I think that more creatives should be doing that and should be incentivized to do that. But again, if your creative agency is just paid on quantity of ads that they're making, they're not incentivized to make a banger ad that lasts forever.
I have about a million questions. My head is like,
sorry, that was a long, I said a lot of things.
It was awesome. Me and Colby are just like, so first thing I think I wanted to ask was that links really nicely. I think, your model there around incentivization and you kind of modeling it on, okay, pay me a proportion of the ad spend. And that links really nicely to Colby's original question around, okay, so what about the media buying side of things? Like, do you want to get eyes on how they're structuring that, whether it's going into like, a cost cap or an ASC or CBO, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Okay, great. So going back to the original question, like great creative will work regardless of media buying, period. Right? That is really important. In fact, I would argue a lot of really bad media buying strategies exist on the back of incredible creative, but people can't know, right? What's what. They can't know it's working or not. And the media buyers just want to take credit for it. They'll be like, oh, our media buying strategy is amazing. Meanwhile, you could have done pretty much anything and it would have worked. So That's true of great creative. I do think that, especially at larger scale, media buying starts to matter a lot more. Um, Especially when your brand is larger, your brand has been around for longer. Um, and also, it depends on what I've learned more in the past year or two. Is it also depends on the existing demand for your category. The media buying can matter very differently for all of these things. Um, and the reason I say that is there's a weird, just deeply, the system of Meta and or any optimized ad platform doesn't understand your business goals or objectives like you do, and doesn't care. But you're playing by the rules, or it's going to play by the rules. The system will play by the rules that you allow it to. So if you're saying, I want as many sales and as many conversions, as many purchases as possible for this budget, that's what it's going to do. It's going to go out there and it's going to do its best. It's going to do it however you allow it to. So if you allow it to do that based on 7-day click or 1-day click or 7-day click and 1-day view, it will take advantage of that. Now, for smaller brands, it doesn't really matter that much. But the bigger your brand is, the more traffic sources you have, and the more existing demand that there is for your category, the more the system can and will be lazy about getting you incremental conversions, because the system doesn't care about incrementality. The system is just like an infant, or a toddler rather. It just wants a reward, or child. It just wants a reward of counting a conversion for that money. It doesn't care if it gets it from 1-day click in Instagram feed, or 1-day view in right column ad, or 1-day view in ads on Reels, or whatever cheap placement it can deliver on. So the system doesn't care. So when you're small, it doesn't matter, because everything you're doing is kind of going to, like, a lot of your Facebook ads are probably going to be a big cause of it. But when you're bigger and you have multiple traffic sources, if you have like TikTok spending a lot, then that means you're going to have warm traffic coming in from TikTok. And then Facebook can sense that, knows they're there, and can show ads to those people. So it all depends on like what your attribution setting is, what your exclusions are, what the warmth of your audience is. So all of these factors are really complex and really hard to comprehend. And the reason I have to talk about it and be such a geek about all this stuff is because when the system delivers ads, because it can choose to deliver to warmer users, colder users, whatever it wants, if you allow it to, which you generally should, the the system, like the system, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. The system will, the system will deliver different creative to those different users based on where they are in the funnel. So if like it thinks this ad will get a conversion from these users, it's going to deliver to them. But again, it doesn't know or care if that is someone who's already going to convert anyway, because they already know they've been to site. They already know maybe that they've like registered a lead, right, for that brand. Maybe that, like, again, a user comes in from TikTok, goes to the site, shops, adds to cart, does a lead form submission, but doesn't buy. And then later they're on Instagram. Instagram's definitely going to show them an ad. So even if they don't click on that ad, that person might buy later that day, might buy tomorrow, but Instagram's going to get credit for, Instagram's going to take credit for it. TikTok's going to take credit for it. It becomes a third-party attribution problem, which none of that's accurate, really, probably anyway. But my point is that the platform is just trying to deliver the ad that's going to take credit for that. So it really helps for a creative strategist, anyone involved in the performance creative world, to deeply understand and empathize consumers and how they operate and what their flow is, but also deeply empathize with how Meta's system, or any ad buying platform system, can operate and wants to operate, and how it can trick you in order to just count more sales and attribute more sales, even if they're not incremental. So that to me is And again, maybe I'm biased because that's what I'm good at, is understanding those things. But I do find that that's what people pay me for. People pay me to help them understand that, and trying to suss that out is extremely helpful. Because if you go look at an ad, you go look at an image ad. I did this yesterday for a client where we could see an image ad was getting more view through conversions as a proportion of their sales than click conversions. And then because we have the new Advantage Plus breakdown, or the account level breakdowns, where you can view engaged or existing customers, like engaged audience or existing customers, we were able to break that down and see that for that ad, that one image ad, like the top 5 spenders were videos, and then, or the top 4, and then the 5th ad was an image. And the image ad had more delivery to the engaged audience than, as a proportion, than any other ad by a lot. Like, it had more delivery to engaged audience than the new audience, while every other video ad had like 5 to 10 times more delivery on the new audience. So like, it's amazing that we now get to actually see those breakdowns, which proves all the things I've been saying for
iOS
years.
14.
Yeah, I've been saying these things for years, that this is how this works, but we just can't see it. But now we can actually see in the breakdowns, and using the compare attribution settings tool, we can see how and where these conversions are actually being attributed to different users. And you can kind of see, not that the system's necessarily cheating, but it's playing the game within the rules that you're allowing it to play. So is that a media buyer problem? Mostly. But if a creative strategist doesn't understand and can't understand how the system might be deceiving you, and how the system is only giving you sales data on the thing that got the last click or touch before a purchase, not any of the other touches before that, that's like insanity for a creative strategist. And I will say one more long, annoying thing. Sorry, I appreciate you.
No, you're good.
I've had to have talks, and I actually don't like publicizing this too much, but like, I've had to have talks with like ad crate team, like internally, where we're like, I'm basically like, guys, we have to pretty much ignore any secondary metrics. Pretty much, like, we can look at them, especially to compare like similar assets to each other. But because we cannot know how ads are being delivered to certain types of users, like things like hook rate, click-through rate, CPC, CPM, all of any of these things are almost completely useless in terms of actual comprehension and understanding of what's working, because the system doesn't optimize for those things. The system just optimizes for spending more on the things that generate more sales. And if it thinks spending more on this high CPM, low CTR ad is going to generate more sales overall, then it's going to do it. And we shouldn't really be judging individual ads too harshly based on some weird metrics. It does often work out that your best ads have the best CTRs and the best hook rates. It does often work out that way, but it doesn't have to, and it can often be misleading. So that's my whole big spiel.
Yeah, and it's not always as simple as you hear this more in the software industry than working with e-commerce brands, but just increase CTR and our ROAS will go up. It's not always that simple to like pull one lever and the other lever goes. But you shared a lot of good insights there. I want to kind of double back to what you were saying and just ask. So you have this offer where you're looking at providing people with ads that will perform, and then you get money based off of spend, performance-wise that way. How do you prefer? And I know every account's different. There may not be a universal cost cap kills all type thing, but what's your ideal testing setup at today's time? And if you're not looking at secondary metrics, hook rate, CTR, what do you care about?
Great question. Look, I actually have a few different accounts where I tested a few different ways, and it depends on different variables and different things. But generally, I kind of have this like, I don't know. I might call it like a hybrid testing model, where I like the idea of cost caps and bid caps, and I love it in premise. Like in premise, it's brilliant, right? Like don't spend money on stuff that doesn't work. Like it makes sense. But in reality, it can choke out ads that have potential without giving them a chance. And then someone would say, oh, well, you can just increase the bid on those. And I'd say, well, then what's the point of the rigid bids in the first place? So I do like to have a high cost cap just to prevent any major runaways. So, right, like if my expected CPA is 50, I might set a cost cap at 100 just to prevent those nightmares where you put a test in there and it's really, really sucks, right? Just so we're like, the system will be like, hey, I'm going to stop spending here. I don't think this is going to work. And then you can go and analyze it rather than the system spending, a few $100 or $1,000 or whatever on it, and then you can analyze and be like, what happened here? So I put, 4 to 6 versions of a concept in an ad set. That's a batch. And I let those all go. I try to keep all variables to a minimal. So like if I'm testing creative, I'm not changing copy typically, unless I firmly believe that the copy needs to be changed with that creative in order to improve performance. And I know
to make sense.
And I know that I know I'm adding an extra variable, but I know that is okay. Like I as long as I know that. I'm not going to change landing pages. I'm not going to change destination, whatever. So I'm going to do a batch of 6, which is usually like 6 versions of an image, 6 versions of a video, something like that. Sometimes I might mix it up. It might be one ad going to 4 different landing pages, maybe, if I wanted to do that and see, it's not the best way to test landing pages, but I might do that. But then, I'll either run that in one big campaign with a bunch of tests in it. And then usually move stuff over to ASC. That's basically it. The reason why I say that, you don't need to do anything too crazy, in my opinion. But it is important that you set up the targeting for each of those in a way that you can comprehend what's going on. And I prefer my testing ad sets to focus on colder audiences. So typically I'll exclude recent visitors and recent engagers from my testing, going back to what we were talking about the crossover between creative strategist and media buyer, because I want to make ads that work well for people who don't care about my brand or my product yet. For almost everything I do, that is my top priority. So making an ad that works well for my warm audiences is not my priority, and is not a way to scale my business, but it's a great way to make an ad set look like it's performing really good. And that's not my goal. My goal is to improve scale and efficiency. And so that's why I want to have testing go to colder audiences. And then I'll allow the ASC, typically an ASC, maybe it would just be like a non-ASC. I'll let the ASC do warm, colds, like whatever it wants. And then I'll control that how I need to. And then sometimes I use ABO. Sometimes I use CBO, depending on the needs of the client, depending on how aggressive we are, depending on whatever. I prefer ABO for that, but I sometimes use CBO for that too. So I think it just becomes more difficult to comprehend what's working and what's not with the creative strategy side. I'd prefer to have everything spending $200 and have a benchmark to hit, rather than gaining some more efficiency. Like using the CBO is more efficient, right? I get that, but it's harder for me to judge and gauge performance versus a benchmark, which is what's helpful for me. And the last thing I'll say on this, if I'm not looking at hook rates and I'm not looking at click rates, I'm not saying I don't look at those. I look at them diagnostically, right? Because I'll be like, if an ad that has a really bad CPC, if it has a great CPA, who cares? But if it has a really bad CPA and it has bad CPC, I'll go look at that. And that's a diagnostic, sure. But I usually will look at secondary metrics. So add to cart, cost per add to cart, or cost per checkout initiated, to me is always, except for the brief period after iOS 14 changes where it kind of became useless. But before then, and then more recently, those metrics have been useful enough as a guide to be able to look at like, is this getting people to the site and to take valuable actions on the site that like a bot wouldn't do, and they're not being forced to do. If the first button on your landing page adds to cart, that's actually not a great measurement, right? Because it doesn't require, if it's above the fold and it's the first thing, then that add to cart cost per add to cart is going to be really low, and it's going to be artificially. It's good. Yeah, it's like not a great metric. So it's about like, it's about understanding and empathizing with the consumer and what they're doing.
And I like those metrics as well as an indication of, especially when you're running new ads, should we keep spending on this or not? And there are obviously mixed views on this and generalized views of how much we should spend on any kind of test. But whatever your threshold is for that, if you're at that threshold, that to me, and you haven't had a purchase or captured anything yet, isn't necessarily right, we're killing this ad. It's okay, so let's see if they've been doing something else in the funnel. Have they initiated checkout? What's cost per initiate checkout versus account average? Have they added to cart? What's add to cart cost per compared to account average? Because it's just giving you those indications of they're hard soft metrics. The soft metrics like click rate is really too soft. And then if you're not got a CPA, you can't look at hard metrics. So maybe we could call them the medium metrics, or the medium hard metrics. I think they're really, really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like it's imperfect. All of this is imperfect, and we have to acknowledge that. We're just using them as signals, as a guide, as a way to comprehend what might be happening and how and why people might be engaging with our ads and with our site. And that is good. Like, generally speaking, if you're getting people to pay attention to your ad, click on it, and then take a valuable action on your site, like, that's valuable and good. And maybe that person isn't ever going to buy. Maybe that person's never going to buy from your site, but maybe that's a person who's going to go and buy from Amazon, or maybe that's a person who's going to go buy if you're in retail, or, you know, whatever it is. It's still a good sign that that ad did something and had an impact. That ad, that like landing page flow, the site, all of it had a positive impact that got someone to take action. And that's positive signal for me, at least from the creative aspect, that we got someone to do that. And for some brands, it's easier than others. If you're selling like a cool sweater, all you need to do that is maybe a good picture of a sweater or a cool person in the sweater. And that's it. You don't need to do a lot, maybe advertising wise, to make that work. But for other products, I think you really do have to really push harder.
And I think that's where it comes back to as well. You mentioned before about, you know, not running these short-term promotional campaigns and or ads, and building creatives that have longevity for the business. And I think that's where, you know, you touched a little bit there on behavioral psychology. And I think that's where the key unlock is, for sure, in terms of that longevity, especially if you're in a brand, especially if you're a brand in an industry that's really competitive, and you sell sweaters, but maybe they don't look really cool, but you still have some really good stuff to like position it. There's a product market fit. That's why you're kind of surviving in the first place, right? But how you kind of tap into that and get that across to users, that's where the scalability and the longevity comes, is taking it back to what's in it for the user. What are we actually kind of helping them with? And it could be just as simple as looking cool. Everyone wants to look cool. Like, we might not admit it, but we do. So you can, if you can show the ad that you're going to make them look cool in a way that isn't as cheesy as that and is way better copywritten, because I'm not a copywriter, I'm terrible at that, then you know, you're onto something. And that's where I think the scale and the longevity comes in.
No, I totally agree. Like, it's, you know, I think it's funny. It's like sometimes it's about actually making great ads, and sometimes, going back to the media buying side, sometimes it's just about making the ad that just is really good at getting credit. Like, you know, it's not always, by the way, I want to just jump back. It's not always just view attribution that lies. Click attribution lies as well. Because friendly reminder to anyone listening, like, for Facebook to take click credit for a conversion, it just needs you to click on the ad, anywhere on the ad. And that counts as a click that it can then attribute to a conversion. So if you like pause the video to stop to look at it, or if you click on the comments to read the comments, and then you later buy, even if you never click the link to go from there, that still counts as a conversion. So that it can track. So like, sometimes you might just have an ad that has lots of comments on it, where people click to see the comments. And like, that's what Facebook will optimize to, just because it gets more non-link clicks on it from warm users. So it knows that it will just get conversion, more chances for conversion attribution from that, which is like deep conspiracy thinking. But in reality, this it does happen.
Yeah. It's,
Question on that. Sorry.
I'll
Question on that. I've always kind of thought, if we can flush the algorithm with data, I mean, attribution aside, because that is a whole minefield, but I've always kind of had a theory, like if we can flush the attribution with the data, so flush the algorithm with data,
right,
then it helps to find the right person. So in that example there, you know, the algorithm is going to be optimizing for people that have clicked to see the comments, and then the comment section grows, and that's where you have these random ads that have just got like 100 comments on it, because Meta's algorithm has gone in that little pocket and optimized for that action. But actually, if that's giving loads of data to the algorithm, do you think that helps with optimization long term of that creative and of that ad set and campaign?
I don't think it's as much about a signal as actually. So there's two sides of the comment thing. One is like, there's that like kind of conspiracy side, like I just said, where like it can optimize to ads that like where people click on it for some reason. Another example where people, by the way, click on ads is when they think it's an image that you can expand, and they think like where the image is cut off. And I've seen that happen where people upload 9:16 or 4:5 images and they get cut off to squares. So people, especially older users, will click on it thinking they can make it bigger, and it clicks the link and they're like, oh no, and they just back out of it. So that counts too. I've seen that get a lot of delivery, and you can do a breakdown. You can see different columns for link clicks versus all clicks, and I recommend you go look at that and look at all your ads and see if there's any that have a particularly low cost per click all versus your regular cost per click. But you know, in terms of comments, I don't think the system is necessarily like cares about the comments or the what people are saying, but it cares fundamentally what that users are paying attention to it. So if an ad generates comments, that first of all means that people are paying attention to the ad and commenting on it, especially if there's something that bothers them in it or there's something they really like in it, and then they'll comment. So that's a positive thing, but mostly it's just about Facebook's overall goal of keeping people in the app as long as possible, or Meta's overall goal of keeping people in the app as long as possible. So if your ad helps that by keeping people paying attention to your video, keeping people paying attention to reading the comments, that's a positive signal, and you'll actually get discounted. Your ads will be actually discounted for that. You can't see that, you won't know that, but it does. And then
the CPMs might be lower. I see lower CPMs on ads with high engagement quite a lot.
Sure. Yeah. In premise, that's what happens, but like, it's really hard to measure that because your ads, unless you're isolating to individual placements, individual ages, individual whatever, like you can't really examine CPMs, right? Like it's possible that maybe just younger users or older users, and that'll affect the CPMs more. But yeah, generally, like in premise, your CPMs should be cheaper if you have an ad that people like more. That is in premise, right? But very hard to actually see that. But so like, yes, while I'm saying the comments can take credit for it, where people click at it and maybe they're going to buy anyway, but also fundamentally, if there are comments and they're overwhelmingly positive, then yeah, that will absolutely impact the people's perception of the product, of the ad, and make them more likely to buy. On the other hand, negative comments can build up, and it will hurt performance of the ad. And that's what I see a lot of people mistake for creative fatigue, is actually that just an ad's been there for a while and that there's just so much negative comments on it that have likes. Like I saw it literally yesterday. I was looking at an ad that had like a negative comment on it that had 130 likes, like on that comment, which means that probably surely thousands of people saw that comment and it did something in their brain and they didn't click that like button. So that's what I talk about when I talk about deep empathy for the consumer. It's like, what are they seeing? What are people seeing? How are they reacting? What matters to them? And if they see someone posting a comment that's like, oh, you don't need this product, just use this cheap product you can get at the grocery store, like instead, then that's literally vandalism on your ad, and that's going to hurt performance on your ad, and perhaps hurt performance of your brand overall forever.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
It's quick, recreate that ad,
clean
take
that
the
up.
ad ID out.
Yeah, I mean, like you can hide comments, you can keep recreating ads. We're just refreshing them with different copy, different thumbnail, whatever, just to make a new ad without those negative comments in them. So there's a lot of solutions to that, but I don't think it's algorithm based as much as it is human based, that humans want to
Behavior.
read those and learn from them and develop opinions from it. And it's, I think the reason why it can be sneaky and why people think of it as fatigue is because it's like a frog boiling in a pot. You don't know it's getting worse, really. You don't know you're about to die until it's too late. And now the comments have all piled up. And the system doesn't understand that either. The system doesn't see the change, doesn't know. The system's like, this ad's just in here. The advertiser hasn't changed the copy or anything about it. This ad is this ad. So this ad should have this estimated action rate. And it doesn't comprehend that the comments can actually affect that over time. Or if it does, it takes a while for it to start to realize, this ad isn't working as much anymore, for it to like start to redistribute spend. This is complex stuff.
So,
It's like from like analyzing so many millions of dollars of ad spend. It's ridiculous.
It's a lot of opportunities for creative strategists to look at optimization wise, performance wise, and just kind of going back to our main topic for the last question, because I know we're getting to the top of the call here.
Sure.
One of the last questions that we asked on our survey that we gave out was, are there any pain points or bottlenecks you've had when collaborating with a media buying team? One of the responses was they're the point of contact for the client and might not be fully equipped to defend, is the term they used, our creatives. So that's one. But what would you say are some of the biggest challenges or ways that creative strategists could proactively set some things up to make sure that there is success with that partnership?
I mean, this is tough. This is really tough because media buyers want to run the show and want to take, and they're at the, often responsible for it. And a lot of them, this is what feeds them, feeds their families, so they're really defensive about it. And they don't take questions well. They don't want to listen to a creative strategist. In fact, one of the last things I want to do as a media buyer is listen to a creative strategist. So I empathize with that. And I've had to tell creative strategists before, like, here's my perspective on this. Here's how to be an advanced media buyer and comprehend this. And if you understand this and you're dealing with a media buyer who doesn't, you're fucked. There's nothing that you can do, because there's no way a media buyer is ever going to listen to you. If you're a creative strategist with a good media buying background, they're not going to listen to you. They don't care. They just don't. And the biggest struggle I often see is overzealous media buyers who want to look like they're doing work and want to feel like they're doing a lot of work, just turning off things. They look at an ad and they're like, CPA is too high, shut it off. ROAS is too low, shut it off. CTR is too low, shut it off. CPM is too high, that can't work, shut it off. And in doing so, they prohibit scale and they prohibit growth, because what often happens is your top spending ad, your best ad, is the ad that is most likely to generate the most sales for your campaign, for your ad set, for whatever, for your account. But if you turn that off, you're turning it off because maybe everything's struggling. And now you're turning off the ad that had the best chance of having the highest positive impact. But the top spending thing is the thing that is going to look worst if something bad happens. So turning off that one ad isn't the right answer. Investigating why that ad is not working is the right answer. Go and look at the comments. That's what I always tell people. Go and look at the comments. Go look at the placement breakdown. See where that ad is being delivered. Go do anything you can except for immediately turn that ad off, because just turning off that ad is it's such a violent, painful thing to do to the system. I just see that mistake all the time. So the best guidance I would say to a creative strategist is, is send them this clip, send them this nugget, right? Where, it's like, hey, I get it. You saw metrics that weren't good. You saw maybe performance looked bad on this ad, but this ad was spending a lot. But you turned it off because of those metrics looking bad. And I would say to them, maybe don't turn that ad off. Maybe move that ad to somewhere else at least, so you can maybe at least control the spend of it. But there are probably, just millions and millions of ads and ad accounts everywhere that have been turned off that were perfectly great. In fact, super scalable ads that were turned off and never revisited. And this is like, again, going back to what I said earlier about making evergreen, long-term scaling ads. That's the antithesis of this.
Mm-hmm.
There are absolutely big scalable ads. This actually just happened to me. The agency that for one of the brands that I did this one banger ad for, they got a new media buying agency, and they turned off my top spending ad. And I said to the CEO, the founder, I was like, hey, I noticed this is off. Like, obviously I'm incentivized for that ad to stay on financially, so I'm biased. And I said that, but I'm like, also, from a deep media buying premise, like, I don't think that's right. What are they doing? And it was classic, like, well, they saw the last 7 days the CPA was higher than everything else. I was like, yeah, but maybe there's some other reasons for that. And it's, again, the top spending ad. And then spend shriveled up. So overall spend shriveled up the following weeks. And they weren't able to scale. So they had to turn it back on. And it's wild to me, like, had I not intervened, they probably just would have left that off. They would have been like, oh, that ad's dead. That ad's done. We're never turning that ad back on. That ad is a bad ad now. It's fatigued. It's bad. Goodbye. And that's just not how it works. In fact, you can probably just refresh it. That's your best bet, is just refresh your quote unquote fatigued ads before you want to call them actually fatigued.
That's my biggest bugbears. I hear you. I feel that to my core. Like, we have supermetric sheets with like a line by line of all our ad creatives, and I'll deliver creatives. I'll keep an eye on their performance. I'm a media buy background also. And then the media buyer, like, we need more creatives. And I'm like, well, that one from 2 packages ago that did so well is off. Why is it off? Like, that ad there has a better performance than what you're getting right now. Why have we not turned it back on again? Like, you should always be like kind of going back. Performance baseline changes so frequently. And actually, so you said that frustration of turning it off and never revisiting it again is so much wasted potential.
So much waste. I try to say reduce, reuse, recycle, right? Like, there's so many, there's so many times where you're just like, oh, that concept is dead. Like, okay. And all the clips within it are dead too. Like, no, like, we need to, that second clip in that ad was great. Like, I don't have data to prove that it was great, but like, I think it was pretty good. We should use it again. We can't just only reuse the clips from only our best ads. Like, we have to be able to look at individual clips on a different, basis. So yeah, it is. But by the way, I do generally say, like, it's spent. Like, it's literally, we're telling the system, get us conversions. Mm-hmm. So at the end of the day, the thing that spends the most, that's probably the thing that's working best, even if it doesn't report out, because it's an optimized system. So the reporting, the conversions that we see, that's just what the system can report to us. We can't see how people are engaging with it with other ads. Like, if people are seeing this ad first and then this ad and then this ad, we can't know. But the system kind of understands that and spends more on ads that's going to get more people to buy. It's not just about this one ad gets more people to buy on this ad. It's about this kind of bigger ecosphere. So it's really hard to know how new ads slot into that. It's basically impossible to know.
Well, Barry, this conversation has sparked at least 15 more questions. I think we should do this will be a part 3 in the future, because this will be a part 2 here. But for anybody listening, there is a episode Barry came on in the past and talked through media buying as a whole. Be a great listen. Barry, your banger ad offer, how do people get in contact with you for that?
Just beg me on Twitter or LinkedIn or somewhere. Find me, Barry Hott on my web. You'll find my website. Reach out to me there. I'm building the landing page for that specifically, so there'll be like an actual form. But for now, just find me, message me somewhere, and I'll set up a call and we can see if it makes sense.
Well, Barry, this was a good conversation. Part 3, hopefully,
Super.
in the future. Would love to catch up
Yeah,
again.
I'd love to. Y'all are great. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Barry.